The funny thing is, we're sitting in the back saying, which stories can we tell and which ones are too secret? Because for every Ronco is like an iceberg. For every story where you hear how he saved the day, there's a bunch where you can never tell how he saved the day. Have you ever seen Pulp Fiction? He's sort of like the wolf. Like he's cleaned a lot of brains off the back windows of cars. He laughs nervously, but does not contradict me. All right. So Ron, and Ron, like officially, Ron is SV Angel, right? You are the limited partner or something like that of SV Angel.
Yeah, I'm not a managing partner. David Lee's the managing partner because I don't like being a fiduciary. I am just the largest investor.
But officially, Ron Conway doesn't invest in your company. SV Angel invests in your company.
Right.
So if you ever see that in a cap table, that's Ronco. So how many startups have you funded now?
Since 1994, about 650.
1994. How many of you were not born yet in 1994? Not that many. 650.
Yes.
Including, can you name some of the more successful ones?
Ask Jeeves was the first big liquidity event that we had. Google, Facebook, Twitter, PayPal, Pinterest.
Okay, you're doing pretty well.
And then the YC companies, Airbnb and Dropbox. The YC companies that are already getting to very big scale.
How did you get into this? You started out as a founder yourself, right? Back when startups made like computers.
Right. Even though I don't invest in hardware today, the company that I co-founded was Alto's Computer back in the late 70s, and we ended up taking that company public in 1982. And my experience at Altos plus two other startups that I co-founded is what gives me such respect for what entrepreneurs go through. The theme all day is that, hey, it's not easy. It's actually hard. I know that because I did it.
It was even harder then in a lot of ways.
It sure
raising
was.
money. The stories.
Yes, back in the late 70s, in order to get venture capital, you had to have high growth and be profitable. If you weren't, you didn't even qualify.
So why did people take venture capital if they were already profitable and growing fast?
In the case of Altos, it was a hardware company, so we had a lot of cost of goods and marketing, and so we wanted to build a war chest to keep building the business.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that.
In fact, our VC was Don Valentine from Sequoia, who is really, I think, the patron saint of venture capital.
Patron.
He's retired now.
What's changed about startups since then?
Well, I think it's. I'd rather talk about what's not changed.
Okay, sure. Actually, that was going to be my next question.
Okay. Because what's not changed is what Jessica talked about, which is you have to have determination and conviction. You have to be a leader. What has changed is in the workplace, people drink less. At Altos,
that's not what I thought you were going to say.
In the back of my mind, I've been saying, "Hey, wait a minute! I want to answer the question about what has changed." At Altos, we had a CFO who was in her 60s, and at 5 o'clock every day, she would wheel around the booze cart. Everyone would have a drink, chit-chat for a little bit. It wasn't even a happy hour. It was a happy 10 minutes. But then it motivated everyone to stay till 9 or 10 or o'clock at night. Now, our kind of motto was work hard and play hard. And
at the same time.
Yeah. We actually... We did it via multitasking. I think the startups today know how to segment a little better, and they have happy hour on a Friday
instead of every day.
So
what else has changed besides drinking less?
Well, I think what's not changed is the fact that once you have to focus on growth. Back in the hardware days, you didn't have to focus, in my opinion, on product or consumer satisfaction as much.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was more like, ship, and get it out, and if it doesn't work, take it back and fix it.
Because hardware was so hard to ship that if you could ship at all, that was consumer satisfaction.
Exactly. Customers were happy just to get it.
Right.
And then if it didn't work, we had this big RMA department, return material authorizations. But today, what's changed, and now, well, SV Angel, and the best decision I ever made in 1994 was only to invest in internet software.
In 1994?
In 1994. So I think hardware scarred me. But that was the best decision I ever made, is that in 94, thinking this thing called the internet is going to be really disruptive.
But back then, like 1994, it probably meant the internet, not the web. Like the web sort of existed, but had you heard of it when you decided to go into internet investing?
Well, back in 1994,
were you investing in like FTP and email?
Well, it would be more like people would say TCP/IP,
yeah,
as often as they would say the internet, and I remember it as TCP/IP at the time.
Wow.
But and people would talk about email, but they'd have to explain what email was. It was this protocol on TCP/IP.
So you sort of didn't get in at the ground floor of internet investing. You got in the basement. Right?
Yes,
you
got in the basement.
Go up to get to the ground.
Slowly
floor.
went up the stairs to the first floor.
How did you that was a really good decision, it turns out, to get into internet investing in 1994. But why? How did you do that?
Well, I was co-investing with Ben Rosen at the time. After founding a couple of companies, I discovered, because I started dabbling in angel investing, that I really enjoyed mentoring entrepreneurs more than being the entrepreneur myself. So in 94 is when I sold my second company and went home and told my wife, hey, I found a new job. And she said, I didn't know you were looking. And I said, yeah, I'm going to do this angel investing for the rest of my life.
What did she think of that? Did she know what she was getting into?
She's always thought I was crazy, so she thinks I'm crazy today. But I sat with Ben Rosen, who was then the chairman of Compaq. Ben lives in New York, and we said, innovation is all about growth. So we said, let's just find a sector that's growing like crazy or is going to grow like crazy and be disruptive, because innovation is disruptive. And we said, hey, let's just throw all in on the internet. So our only rule is internet software, and off we went. And sitting here today, still only internet software. Now, the market's gotten huge. I still think we're in the infancy on the internet, though. I've been saying this since 1994. I believe it more than ever. Just add a little touch of e-commerce on top of the internet, and you're talking about an opportunity that's as big as all the internet today, especially with Facebook and Open Graph helping companies go find their customers, and Pinterest. Will probably be. In fact, I'll quote the monetization guy at Twitter. I won't even take the risk of misquoting. But the monetization guy at Twitter told me a couple of weeks ago. He goes, "Hey, Twitter's on a tear now. Like Google and Facebook. Once they get to stride, Twitter's got a really nice growth rate now. Took a while, more than normal.
Revenue growth, you mean?
Revenue growth.
Okay.
This is about revenue growth. And this guy said to me, but will never grow like Pinterest was once they decide to monetize, because they will be an e-commerce engine like never before. and they'll be.
What are the biggest misses you've had? Can you remember some big ones you missed?
Well, yes. Salesforce.com. This is in 1998 and 99 when the bubble was starting to take effect. And I thought $30 million valuation for Salesforce.com was a little too high. It's $21 billion today. Pandora. I had just gotten out of Napster. Napster finally had to declare bankruptcy because of all the egos in the VC world and in the music world.
I don't think it's just egos in the music world.
Yeah.
I wish.
And so I was hedging on the music space. So for that reason, I didn't invest in Pandora. Palantir, could have invested there. Didn't understand the size of the market. Even though we invest in the entrepreneur first, in the case of Pandora, I made a dumb move and said, hey, I'm not sure I get how big that market is. Kickstarter we could have invested in early as well. Didn't really get what crowdsourcing was. And look at that space today. It's the lifeblood for a lot of startups. And we have the Jobs Act that takes the legal confusion out of crowdsourcing.
Do you think there's a pattern to what investors miss in general? Like not just you, but investors in general. If founders are working on something that's good, but investors are not going to get, like what kind of things do investors not get?
Well, I think investors don't get probably the stuff that is the first one. Pinterest would be an example. Ben talked about how hard it was to raise money. And if you look at a virtual pin board, that's a brand new idea. So I think investors, even though they like to say, I'm in venture capital, I take risk, they look for pattern recognition, which in this business is probably a mistake. Look at Twitter in the early days. That was a brand new idea.
Yeah.
And lots of VCs turned down Twitter. So with SV Angel,
can you tell the story of how you ended up investing in Twitter?
Sure.
That's a funny story.
With it is. With SV Angel though, we invest in the entrepreneur first. We invest in the human being. And all of our biggest successes is when we said, hey, wow, that's a really forward-thinking idea, but let's go run with it. I love that entrepreneur. I want to invest in every one of their companies. So when I invest in an entrepreneur, I'm investing for life. Unless they do something wrong, I want to invest, for example, in Sean Fanning's 6th startup, Airtime. So for me, it's a lifelong commitment. It makes it more interesting when you have this awesome relationship with a founder where they know me like a book and I know them like a book, so we can move fast and give each other advice.
So you had invested in Odeo, right?
Yeah, so back to Twitter. I had invested in Odeo with Evan Williams and his team. Jack Dorsey was